It's day 11 of Israel-Hamas war. Over 4,200 people have been killed. There is a stalemate as far as allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza is concerned. Truckloads are waiting at the Rafah border. But with the Israel bombing the border post is dysfunctional. The aid can't move in. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization warns that residents of Gaza have just 24 hours of water, electricity and fuel left. The United Nations has put the figure of displaced at 1 million so far. Though Israel is asking Gazans to move towards south, there has been no ceasefire for this evacuation. On the diplomatic front, US President Joe Biden arrives in Tel Aviv on Wednesday. Can there be a diplomatic solution to this crisis? Joining me on the show is our big news maker, straight from Tel Aviv, is former Prime Minister of Israel and a staunch critic of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Ehud Olmert is joining me live. Thank you so much for your time. US President Joe Biden will be in Israel tomorrow. He may also meet Jordan's King Abdullah later, and another meeting with Palestinian President is likely as well. What are the expectations from this high-profile visit at a time when Hamas-Gaza war is only escalating?
Well, first of all, I hope that the meeting between President Biden and the other leaders will be a constructive effort to try and limit the military confrontation to the one thing which is inevitable. And this is the war against Hamas. Hamas is like ISIS. Hamas is like Taliban. Hamas is like Al-Qaeda. This organization doesn't want peace, is not interested in compromise, does not agree to live alongside the state of Israel without military confrontation. And therefore, we must make a concerned effort together with our friends from Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority to try and remove the Hamas from its dominant position in Gaza. This is an essential step towards a momentum of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority to achieve peace between us and the Palestinians. But there will never be peace in as long as Hamas will be in charge of Gaza.
So you're not ruling out a possible diplomatic solution to this war. And this is also coming at a time when there is a situation of total siege of Gaza, which is causing a grave humanitarian crisis. As WHO has been saying, then how will this crisis be resolved?
Well, I heard President Biden a few times in the last week or 10 days, and in each and every one of his statements, he kept saying that Israel has a full right to respond to the atrocities committed by Hamas and to reach out in an effective manner in order to try and remove Hamas from its position in Gaza. So I don't think that diplomatic compromise is aimed or is meant to be a diplomatic compromise with Hamas. I don't think that Biden wants it, and I don't think that Abu Mazen wants it. Certainly not Sisi and King Abdullah. What we need to do is to try and minimize the collateral damage caused to innocent civilians. You must understand something. This is not a competition of who kills more. They killed 1,400, maybe 1,500 Israeli civilians. We are not interested in killing one non-involved civilian in Gaza. On the contrary, we want to make peace with them, but there will never be peace with the people living in Gaza in as long as Hamas is in control of Gaza. So I know that there are innocent people killed in Gaza. The reason that we wanted them to go out of the city into the southern part of Gaza was in order to separate them from the center of the military activity against the heads of Hamas. They are all stationed in the center of Gaza, the headquarters, the bunkers, the launchers, the weapons of Hamas, all are in the center of Gaza. In order to effectively fight against them, we need to have the people living there going outside of the city for a short period of time. And we, together with America and together with the Egyptians and others, will take care of the humanitarian needs of these people.
Mr. Olmert, you made a point that President Biden doesn't want a diplomatic solution. Nobody wants a diplomatic solution in this war. My question then is that there is a visible ripple effect that has reached beyond the borders of Israel and Gaza. They have also put many hopes on hold, particularly the Arab-Israel normalization deal. The battle lines are drawn, the positions have been taken. This has also revived the Palestinian cause. Do you fear this war could expand?
I hope not. I hope not. There are some skirmishes in the north with Hezbollah. At the present time, I don't know to say, you know, they don't give me delicate information from the Hezbollah. They don't like me. I fought against them in 2006, and I've devastated them. And Sheikh Nasrallah said 17 years ago, after the confrontation in the Second Lebanese War, he said that had he known 1% of what I do to them, he wouldn't have started. So I hope that he remembers and that he will not start a military effort now in order to split the Israeli concentration into two different directions, to the south and to the north. That's what may be the purpose of Hezbollah attack. But the reaction of Israel will be very harsh, and I don't think that Hezbollah is interested. So I hope and I think that this is one of the reasons why America brought its aircraft carriers, Gerald Ford and Eisenhower, into the area with enormous air power and missiles power in order to warn Hezbollah and Iran not to expand the war beyond the direct confrontation, which is inevitable, and which America thinks is inevitable, between Israel and Hamas.
What about the normalization deal? Because before the terror strike and the escalation that we are seeing, there was significant movement on that front. You know, the normalization talks that were being held between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Well, I definitely think this is a very appropriate question, because the normalization that was building up and the agreement of a military assistance between America and Saudi Arabia and normalization with Israel was made to try and stop the growing penetration of Iran into this part of the world, which may be a source of instability and turmoil. And perhaps one of the reasons why Hamas, which is the long arm of Iran, was doing what they did last week was precisely in order to stop this process. So my hope is that the Saudis will resume the negotiations for normalization. I think that the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and of course the growing cooperation between America and Saudi Arabia, is very important in order to create a new axis of moderation in our part of the world, in order to stop the penetration of Iran and the extremists and radicals and ayatollahs into our part of the world. And I don't think that anyone needs to give a victory to the brutality and atrocities of the Hamas by stopping this process.
Mr. Olmert, there is a lot of talk of an intelligence failure where Hamas clearly outsmarted Israel's famed Unit 8200, the General Secret Services, also known as Shabak, and several other agencies responsible for surveillance. Did Prime Minister Netanyahu drop the ball on security?
Well, definitely there was a failure. And I think that we need, for ourselves, first of all, to understand that we failed. The intelligence failed. The Secret Service failed. The head of the intelligence, the head of the Secret Service, and the Chief of Staff of the Army, all of them already announced that they assume responsibility for this failure. There can be no question about it. They surprised us. We were caught in a complete surprise. And this is something that will have to be investigated. The reason for it, I think, is not the lack of ability of the Israeli services. It was the exaggerated confidence and maybe some arrogance that we know everything and who are they that they can surprise us. So they proved that they can surprise us. Now the question, which I think you are heading it, is what is the degree of responsibility of the Prime Minister? First of all, I believe that 80% of the Israeli people today would love to see Netanyahu go home as soon as possible. The fact is that he was the proponent, the inspirator of the policy which was overlooking the Palestinian Authority, the moderate Palestinians that we should have negotiated with, that I negotiated with when I was Prime Minister with them. And instead of building up a momentum of negotiations and rapport and understanding with the Palestinian Authority, we downgraded them and uplifted Hamas, because for the Prime Minister, dealing with Hamas he thought was supposed to be safe, because Hamas is definitely not a candidate for a peace process. So you don't have to make concessions to Hamas. And Netanyahu is responsible directly and personally for the famous deal with Hamas, which released more than 1,000 murderers of Hamas in exchange for one Israeli soldier. Now, all the leaders of Hamas today, Yahya Sinwar and all the others, were all released by Netanyahu as part of this deal. So he is perceived to be, he is held, and he is responsible for building up the capabilities of Hamas, which brought about this terrible shock to Israel, and Netanyahu will have to leave. It may take a few weeks, maybe a little bit more, but I guarantee you that when the next time you will interview me, it will be after the Netanyahu has been kicked out of his position.
But there is a unity government in place. What is giving you that confidence that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be out?
You see, that's the secret of the strengths of the Israeli society. The national unity government is not really a national unity. Two members joined of a relatively small party, but very distinguished Israelis who are former chief of staff of the Israeli army. They joined the war cabinet for one purpose and for a short period of time, to help the Israeli army pull itself together and move forward to beat Hamas. They are not partners of Netanyahu. They will not be partners of Netanyahu. And together with other political forces, they will do whatever is needed to do in order to get rid of them.
All right. Former Prime Minister of Israel there, Ehud Olmert, giving us his viewpoint. And he is saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is on his way out. I appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to NDTV. And let me go straight to Ramallah, where Dr. Mustafa Barghouti is joining us live. He is the member of Palestinian Legislative Council and also the former information minister. Dr. Barghouti, the United Nations Human Rights Office has said that Israel's siege of Gaza and the evacuation order there could amount to an international crime. How do you see the current humanitarian crisis that Gazans are facing?
Gazans, unfortunately, are subjected to a war crime through this terrible siege on their life. They are deprived of water, deprived of food, deprived of electricity, and deprived of communication and internet, and they are deprived of medicine and medication. This would mean the death of so many people, because it could mean that many Palestinians who are now in Gaza would not have medical treatment. Children in incubators could die at any moment because there is no electricity. Patients who are in need for kidney dialysis, including 130 children, could die at any moment because they have no access to kidney dialysis. We could also see epidemics in Gaza because of water, of absence of drinking water, suitable drinking water, and because of the pollution of what exists. What we can see in Gaza is also another kind of infections and epidemics because of the suspension of all vaccination programs and because of the destruction of sanitary facilities and sewage systems by Israeli airstrikes. It's a very grave situation. It's a very dangerous one. But in addition to the crime of collective punishment, there is another crime taking place, and that is the genocide through the Israeli airstrikes, which have committed so far more than 70 massacres, taking the life of no less than 1,200 innocent children, as well as no more less than 4,000 other Palestinians. And it is quite possible that there are thousands of people who are still below the rubble that nobody can remove because of Israeli airstrikes.
Okay. Dr. Barghouti, the WHO, that is the World Health Organization, warns that water, electricity and fuel supplies in Gaza will last for perhaps another 24 hours. The Rafah border hasn't really opened. With the clock ticking, what is really the way out?
The only way out is for the United States, which is the only country that seems to have real leverage over Israel, is to force Israel to immediately open a passage for humanitarian support so that water, electricity, food, and medicine can come to Gaza. This is in the hands of Mr. Biden and Mr. Blinken. But the Western other governments are also responsible. They are siding by Israel completely, many of them, and they are supporting Israel unconditionally, and they have done nothing, no serious pressure on Israel to initiate this humanitarian corridor. The Israeli attacks on Gaza at the moment and their siege on Gaza is not a siege on Hamas, it's a siege on the Palestinian population. And Israel is trying to dehumanize all Palestinians, creating an atmosphere of hate to Palestinians. And that results, of course, in terrible crimes like the one that happened in Chicago when an old man stabbed a Palestinian child, 6 years old, to death.
President Biden will be in Tel Aviv tomorrow and may fly to Amman to meet Jordan's King Abdullah. He may also meet Egyptian president and also the Palestinian president. What expectations do you have from his visit?
So far, he's trying to advocate Israeli demands only. And one of the most dangerous demands is that Egypt would open its borders and allow Palestinians in Gaza to flee to Egypt. That would mean ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. If that takes place, it would be the worst third crime ever. And if that happens, Israel will never allow Palestinians from Gaza to come back. And this would be another catastrophe for the Palestinian people, even 3 times as large as the first Nakba, the first catastrophe took place when Israel ethnically cleansed more than 900,000 Palestinians in 1948. This crime should not be allowed, and Mr. Biden should be stopped here if he tries to ask countries like Egypt and Jordan to accept Palestinian refugees instead of forcing Israel to open a safe passage so that water and food and supplies can get to Gaza. He also should demand that Israel stops the airstrikes. How many Palestinians they need to kill before they say that they can stop their airstrikes? Enough is enough.
You're saying enough is enough. Now, coming to the question of United States, it continues to offer military support to Israel, even as it warns Netanyahu of the consequences of occupying Gaza and continues the focus on getting aid into Gaza. Would you say that these are mixed signals?
Yes, mixed signals, and the most important signal is that the United States is telling that it is unconditionally supporting Israel, including a land invasion of Israel of Gaza, a ground invasion of Gaza, and they are even saying that they will send 2,000 American troops to participate in that invasion, which is amazing. I mean, the United States should not be participating in such a war crime. And the most important thing here is that Netanyahu is trying to fulfill his plan. His plan is clear: attacking Gaza viciously, killing as many Palestinians as he can, forcing an eviction, an ethnic cleansing of all Palestinians in Gaza, and then annexing Gaza Strip. That's the nature of the map he carried in the United Nations, where he showed that Israel should include the annexation of all the occupied West Bank, the annexation of all the occupied Gaza Strip, as well as Jerusalem and the Syrian Golan Heights. If that happens, this would mean the end of international law. It would send a very negative message to everybody in the world that we do not live now in a world where international law has existence. It would mean that what we are subjected to is jungle law, where anybody with power can do whatever they like. But more important, the United States here is providing a very clear and shiny example of double standard. In the case of Ukraine, they are sending artillery, jet fighters, $224 billion of military and aid equipment, and to support what they say a fight of Ukraine against occupation. In our case, they are sending jet fighters and aircraft carriers and weapons to the occupier. Where is the logic here?
All right, Dr. Mustafa, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV. And I have just enough time to speak to Dr. Shahar Shilo, who's joining us from Levim in South Israel, to give us a view on the hostage situation there, because there are several families who are waiting for return of their loved ones. Dr. Shilo, thank you so much. Give us, now the number of those who have been held hostage is out. It's nearly 200.
Yeah, it is. And the numbers are not final yet. But this is as far as we know, because the chaos that took place on last Saturday when the whole attack started was too much. And therefore, the numbers are completely unfinal yet. We truly hope that this is the last number. And we are very much hoping for the resolution and resolvement of this situation as soon as possible.
Are the families of those who do not know where their members are, family members are, in touch with the administration to get some news about the hostage situation? Is there a hostage swap? What exactly is happening? Because there's no clarity as yet.
So I must be very honest and say that there's no clarity, including actually the Israelis themselves, because we are in the middle of building an operation that will analyze to the last pieces of intelligence the tracks and the remains of every hostage that was taken to Gaza. You need to remember that some of the Palestinians that invaded Israel did not belong to the same branches of Hamas. Some of them were from Islamic Jihad, others were just simple citizens or civilians who actually invaded along with the Hamas troops, Hamas terrorists, and have taken hostages across the border to different places. So for the first 48 hours, even Hamas themselves did not know the right numbers of hostages held in the Gaza Strip right now. So things are starting to be more clear in the last, I would say, 3 days, but yet there's a lot of lack of intelligence to tell us exactly how many of those are being held by each and every one of the sub-organizations of Hamas, which is not all actually headed from one headquarters.
Okay, so because there are several groups within this large terror organization, Hamas, Dr. Shiloh, last word from you. Certainly there is hope for all those who know that their family has gone missing. The members of their families have gone missing. They're still hopeful that they will be able to return home as and when things improve and there are negotiations held on both the sides. Today was the day when Hamas released its second hostage video. Did the families, what was it like to hear from them at that moment?
So if I may address the former speaker who we've just heard together, if they would at least take responsibility for what happened, because it was all about blaming Israel for what it does right now, but there's no responsibility whatsoever on the Palestinian side of what happened. You need to remember that if the Hamas would just say right now, we are bringing back all the civilians that were taken hostages and the military as well, and please stop the airstrikes, it would happen immediately. But there was no such suggestion on the table. So what we have to do right now is to resolve both problems. First one is to eliminate the possibility that this kind of a catastrophe would ever happen again. And again, I would ask my former friend who just spoke right now, what is the responsibility of the other side to what just happened before Israel actually started the airstrikes on Gaza? And the second thing we need to resolve is the hostage situation, which at the moment by the Israeli government is being held as secondary mission after the elimination of the army military possibilities of Hamas.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Shiloh. We are putting out all those interviews on NDTV.com. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow.